Okay, so I do realize my opinions about the season aren't exactly the most popular, and to be fair, that's partially my fault for kind of relying on this whole shorts format to get them across, when they might have not been the best way of expressing my opinions. I'll also acknowledge that this was one of the more financially successful seasons since the pandemic. That's a fact that should definitely be praised. With all that in mind, will it change my overall opinion about the season? No, of course not. But at the same time, we probably should try to clarify things in ways that we couldn't in just 1 minute. Side note, YouTube really needs to stabilize that longer short stuff ASAP. But yeah, we'll interject when it feels necessary and go over stuff to hopefully make the reviews a little more coherent. With that, let's just get into this little compilation of all of our short reviews, now with widescreen. Get it?
I don't get it.
Well, nothing much to say really other than typical iffy Aoyama animation, with I guess some pretty good humor this week. I mean, truth be told, those two traits actually go pretty well together because Aoyama's animation is so awkward, we end up with possibly intentionally memeable faces. I mean, credit where it's due, I did pop for the JoJo faces at the end, so good job there at least. Still, other than that, and I think I'm just repeating myself at this point, but it's just hard to get invested in the show when the main plot remains so stagnant and we're just doing the same thing every week. We get a little animal trivia, the Cures engage a Garu Garu, and the Neanderthal Cures do most of the work. Granted, I think Mayu might have ruined this poor car in the process, but whatever. Because overall, while I might have liked this a little more just for the comedy, really between this and much of the episode being taken up by transformation sequences, this show just really doesn't have that much bite to it. Well, there goes the show being about actual animals and facts about them. Maybe next week they'll bring in Bigfoot. Nah, but seriously, I'm actually kind of okay with them changing things up in some way at this point in the series. I just kind of want to know what sort of direction they want to take it at this point. I mean, at this point, they may as well rename the show Neanderthal Precure with how much more spotlight they've been getting, with this episode being far more about Yuki. Granted, it's not as though she went through much of an arc in this one either. I mean, she started the episode scared of snakes and was still scared of them by the end. Now, of course, this wouldn't have been as much of an issue if she had defeated the Tsuchinoko Garu Garu, but really, the credit for that should go to Satoru. So really, was there any point to this episode?
Nope.
I guess I should expect no less from the head writer of Delicious Party. It would explain why Guy ends up pretty much saving the day. But yeah, I guess pretty soon Nico might become the Sixth Ranger of this team, but really, I am infinitely more interested in Regina finally becoming a cure in the Doki Doki novels. Oh look, we're finally getting actual villains! Next week. Yeah, does anyone even really care at this point? I mean, don't get me wrong, I do think it's a step in the right direction, but really, it took well over half the season to even get some recurring baddies. Not helping was the fact that this episode didn't really do much of anything, much less build up to these characters, or Nico, who's gonna suddenly hatch next week. I mean, sure, some of the bits at the farm were cute, especially the stuff involving the Neanderthal cures, because we stand for these two, and some of the educational bits were decent, even though I've already learned some of the stuff from Silver Spoon. But yeah, other than that, nothing much, and a very poorly animated battle, which even with actual villains next week, I'm not expecting much of an improvement. And ultimately, if I want to watch Animu characters having fun at the barn, I'll just stick with Pop Team Epic.
We came to farm.
Now, what do you do next?
Floor it?
Yes. No! No! Don't floor it!
Floor it?
No! No, no! Don't floor it!
Okay, floor it!
I mean, as always, credit where it's due, these are steps in the right direction, even though I think we should have at least gotten some foreshadowing for these antagonists, which honestly make me feel like they were last-minute additions because they realized the plot was going nowhere. Which is a pity because Zakuro and Torme here are fine enough characters with an interesting internal rivalry dynamic, which I actually would have liked to have seen play out before we got at least 60% into the series run. And this is the kind of defeat that this team needed based on pure lack of skill and not just forced incompetence. It's legit good drama that this season has been lacking and will motivate them to get better. Meanwhile, the world building was fine. I mean, I think Gao's plans were pretty much exactly what we expected, and the only thing we were really missing was the dude's name. Still, and while I'm still not expecting much, we'll see if this fixes up things. Also, why does Nico have to be this Nico? Okay, credit where it's due, this was a decent-ish follow-up to last week in terms of furthering the world building, and as always, the Neanderthal Precure remained the real stars of the show, as their cuddling scene was really sweet. With that said, the fact that Yuki was the one who suggested they do a 4-person roll call rather than either one of the dog pair really highlights how much these two have become an afterthought. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just not sold on these two as main characters, when the show itself puts more focus on even Satoru possibly becoming a very late mid-season, or more likely, movie-exclusive cure. But yeah, as a result, I'm still not sold on Iroha's conflict with wanting to become friends with the wolves. Maybe it'll get better later, but when they're still not doing proper fighting even after introducing fightable targets, I'm not holding my breath. No, and also a new finisher with new super forms that give the cures chicken dresses and has a wind-up time that's way longer than the actual purification.
That's it?
Also, for those who want to ship Mayu with Sakura, sorry, but she's a furry in every sense of the word, so no. So yeah, after those last 2 episodes, it did feel like things were going to start picking up, which it kind of did, but more on that in just a bit. That said, it did kind of highlight how things really did slow down after Nico's egg was acquired in episode 24. Like, I'm not saying these were bad episodes. Upon rewatching episode 26, I actually found it even funnier, like those desert sequences were pretty great. However, I think the episodes pre-29 could have benefited if Nico's egg had hatched a little sooner and not in the same episode where the villains debuted, who also could benefit from a little foreshadowing. I don't know, it just doesn't feel like they properly transitioned from a filler farm episode before going to a big plot one without, say, like a little stinker to highlight one of those new developments. So, did like Junko Komura win some contest that would let her write pretty much every Neanderthal Kira-centric episode? Not complaining, mind you, because I think she's done a great job, and this episode is just another example of such. While there's rightfully plenty of horror stories involving the dangers of social media, it is nice to see more of the positive effects it can have on a recluse like Mayu. Honestly, would have liked to see her post more, but then the episode became about making up with her old friend that I can't say I'm crazy about. Don't get me wrong, the drama and character development for both the Neanderthals was really good, but making up with Yuma, who dumped her over such a little misunderstanding, yeah, that has the makings of a toxic relationship if I've ever seen it. Whatever, at least Mayu has Yuki, and it is interesting that Sakura can turn regular animals into Gaogons. But yeah, overall, good stuff, though I do wonder how that other show Komura is writing for is doing.
That was awesome!
So yeah, this would end up being Junko Komura's final episode, as I think she wanted to go focus on writing for Chimera Gab, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of lost my enthusiasm for this show, as that Tokusatsu ended up taking it, and it still has. Seriously, go watch Chimera Gab, it's really good. That said, this episode does also feel like her weakest, if only for some broken promises. Like, the title alone seemed like it was going to focus on social media, and how it can be a bit of a double-edged sword for social recluses, which, as someone with autism, I can speak firsthand. Like, it can be a great tool to help express yourself a little more, but also a platform for a few crash outs due to maybe a few one-to-many trolls.
God damn it!
Stuff like that is important to cover, and in fact I kind of hope that Idol will bring up the stuff in some ways, but no, instead for this show, they decided to make it more about making up with a friend that I'm not too much of a fan of. Like, it's not as bad as Hakuto's situation, as at least Mayu's friend didn't actively bully her, but she did ghost her in spite of her trying to reach out and clear things up. I don't know, it just doesn't feel like all that great of a message, especially when it takes away from something much more interesting, which is going to be a bit of a theme with this season. Bye Senpai Cures, see y'all in the movies. Though, and also the Undargu Empire is just kind of randomly here, including Skeerhead somehow. I mean, I'll give the episode this, I actually like that the Senpai Cures didn't intervene in this week's capture, which is technically better than letting the OGs save the Hakuto team and make them look weaker as a result. That said, when the highlight of your episode is still the glorified cameos from the past, it's not exactly making the current team seem all that great by comparison. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything really wrong with this episode, and at this point, I guess we should be glad we're getting at least some sort of development for Iroha, even though it's not that much. She loves animals, and now we know her favorite. That's about it. If anything, the zoo animal stood out more, which did lead to a nice and kind of cheesy moment, which I actually do get behind. But yeah, just another overall average average episode for this series with random cameos to advertise their new movie coming out next week.
Whoop-de-doo!
Yeah, this is a pretty weird one, though not for the cameos. Like, sure, some of them, especially the Undarku Empire, felt incredibly forced. Like, what is even the Empress doing there? But the bigger thing was how much they seemed to push how good it is to have an elephant in captivity at the zoo, which, yeah, about that. Like, I'm no authority figure on this stuff, but yeah, I did see the discussions on X and how it might not exactly be the best for them, especially when it comes to their lifespans. Like, just the way they pushed it, it did kind of feel like some bad propaganda. I mean, it won't affect my opinion on this episode, but you might want to look it up for yourself, as it is interesting stuff to say the least. Is all I can really say about an episode like this. I mean, I guess Mr. Inukai is kind of an interesting character, just for his dedication to his profession, and I think I would have liked to have seen more of what he goes through to take care of the pets, but instead they just focused on his animal voice, which really wasn't that much different than his normal voice. I'll give them this, they at least tied his stuff in with the chase this week, though am I the only one who was a little distracted by the background and all of these weird lines all over the place, as though the resolution suddenly took a dip just for this scene? I don't know, maybe this has always been like this for this show, but I think it was especially bad for this episode, or maybe I just couldn't focus on anything else, because this overall was just one of the most bleh of filler episodes possible. Still for now, I think I'm just gonna look forward to a certain film featuring Yuichi Nakamura playing a major character, the Japanese dub of Transformers 1. What, you thought I was talking about something else?
Transform! 出動!
Oh, hey look, a Neanderthal Precure episode. Not written by Junko Komura.
Boo!
I mean, to be fair, this week's writer, Misuzu Chiba, did write Yami's debut episode, and has done some decent comedies, and in this case, she did write a very decent story of Yuki trying to do her own thing, a wife for Mayu for one episode. It's nice to see that she's not over-reliant on her owner, and has the ability to chill, and even interact with street cats, that I actually would like to see more of, like maybe explore the differences between them and a house cat. But of course, they also had to do a subpar fight of the week, and wow, was the animation this week just not good. As a result, I think they had to rely on some cheap memes like the Obari pose and Homelander in the theater, which Cranewords do both did get a bit of a chuckle out of me. But yeah, overall, definitely not one of Yuki's best episodes, but I guess a decent one. However, knowing that we're going back to Narita's brand of romantic melodrama next week, yeah, I think I'm making this face too. Okay, so as it turned out, I was wrong last week when I assumed Yoshimi Narita was gonna write this episode about the main couple of the show. No, instead, we're getting Sawako Hirabayashi. I mean, to be fair, there was actually some much better comedy this week, with even some really clever visuals to back it. However, once we got to the melodramatic bits of Satoru getting jealous over the police dog owner, who was clearly an older dude by the way, it just became eye-rolling. Not helping matters was the ending where they did cliffhanger just to stretch this plot into the next episode, and yeah, I'm gonna bet that one is gonna be written by Narita. Meanwhile, the origin story for how Satoru developed a crush for Iroha was fine, if a little standard. But yeah, other than a few legit good laughs, this was another meh episode that's gonna lead into a plotline that, frankly, this franchise has never really done all that well. Well, as always, credit where it is due, they went through with it, even if the whole universe had to bend over backwards just to make this shit happen. Like seriously, all the characters were almost creepily obsessed with making this happen, even kind of Zakuro through gaslighting. Still, credit where it's due, they did actually have some good and frank discussions about how romance works, which for this franchise is a miracle in of itself, and especially from this writer. That said, am I at all invested in this relationship? Meh. Again, I'm willing to let them win me over, but I also want Iroha to not be pushed into this relationship by everyone else like she was in this episode. I'll give them this, the fact that the chase this week was more for Satoru rather than the animal did make it a little more exciting because they had actual stakes this time. So yeah, I guess a pretty good episode overall, but really, I think I just want to go back and watch all the other Magical Girl anime of this season. So this is the point of the series that everyone seemed to celebrate, while I was just here going like, is it really that big a deal? Like, it's a fine enough relationship, and Satoru definitely deserved it after pretty much supporting the team for much of the season, but at the same time, I think I've just seen better in other Magical Girl anime, and anime in general, really. Sure, there's absolutely discussion to be had on whether or not some of this stuff is problematic, but at least they had something interesting to them in terms of the greater plot to the show, for better and for worse. Meanwhile, Iroha/Satoru just feels like a pretty bland relationship, as it's two animal lovers with very similar traits falling in love, so it's kind of like trying to mix water with water. I don't know, they just didn't have that much chemistry to me, and really, I think the main reason people enjoyed this relationship so much was because it was the first kind of working heterosexual relationship, as compared to everything else, it either went nowhere, was poorly executed, or had other problematic elements again. But yeah, for setting the bar that low, is it really that much worth praise? I mean, I don't think it takes away from the show, but really, I could take or leave it. You know, in a way, I really like the setup of this episode because it actually highlighted what we brought up last week with how Iroha and Satoru kind of haphazardly got into this relationship because everyone else pretty much pushed them into it. Thus, the awkwardness between them is believable, and their talk about how they have to get used to this new relationship was actually well done. That said, the rest of the episode was kind of more the bad kind of awkward. Mimi's antics to try and bust their date were just eye-rolling, and yeah, they tried to make up for it by giving him a heroic moment to save Komugi and Yuki, but really, that just makes the cures look weak. Oh yeah, and in terms of the action this week, it's Mitsuru Aoyama animation, so the awkwardness is pretty much a given. That said, it was enjoyable to see Mayu again prove that she and her cat are the real main characters of the show by leading things this week, so that at least made this an overall better than average episode, I guess. Well, there goes a ton of Komugi theories out the window. I mean, yeah, I would want to have seen a past where the little pup was mistreated, but come on, let's all admit, that's kind of the feeling we got when we originally saw her flashback, right? But no, instead, she just turned out to be a therapy pet to a really kind old man, which I'm not sure if they could even use an untrained puppy for that, but I guess they had to give Iroha a crying scene when she met her previous owner, who they probably couldn't even return her to after she had been domesticated in another home. But yeah, I guess some of the emotional scenes were fine, but just didn't really win me over when I tend to overthink these things as much as I do. Moreover, yeah, I do think it's a little underwhelming that Komugi doesn't seem to have any real connections with the Nico Guard at this point as just a plain old dog. Really, nothing much else I could say other than I think Ichika wants her gimmick back. So yeah, I was obviously kind of wrong about that stuff, and that's definitely on me for rushing out these reviews and not getting the subs in first. That said, it doesn't really change my opinion about this episode, and in fact, it kind of makes the drama feel even more forced. Like, really, it's kind of way too late for Iroha to now worry about Komugi wanting to go back to her original owner, considering that they had pretty much domesticated her to their home way before the start of the series. Which, yeah, then kind of brings up the little issue of why didn't the Inukais try to find Komugi's original owner? Like, even if they suspected animal mistreatment, it is kind of in their duty as veterinarians to look into any lost animals, which could have been easy to do considering that Komugi escaped from a care center. I don't know, it just feels kind of wrong that the dog pair's relationship only really started because Komugi ended up running away from her original owner, who was a kind old man who kind of needs an emotional support animal at his age. Honestly, it doesn't bother me too much, but a regular commenter did reach out to me and say that it did kind of bother them a lot to the point that it kind of ruined the main pair of the show, but I won't say much more and let them say what they want in the comments below. Oh, Komugi got turned evil.
No. Anyway.
I mean, don't look at me, that's how the episode treated it. Like, between this and Sora from last season, what really is the point in getting invested in a protagonist being corrupted if both cases are not going to be by choice and resolved in less time than it took me to write this script? If anything, the thing that did actually kind of catch my attention was Komugi get along with Gaon, if only because my predictions are actually coming true for once, and Narita is doing yet another problematic ship. I mean, other than how they handled it in Otana, I wasn't that against Koko knows me, and at least these two are close enough in species, but yeah, it does feel like they're doing the whole hero/villain ship, complete with a little age difference. I mean, let's be honest, that's what she's done with a lot of her shows. I will say, it is at least kind of interesting that this big bad does treat other animals well when he's not brainwashing them, but other than that, this is a pretty toothless Halloween special. Yeah, again, I kind of have to admit to one of my many follies. I mean, to be fair, I was still a little shell-shocked from the writer's other show, but that still shouldn't affect what I think about this show, so that's definitely on me. I mean, there's still some problematic elements, hi Sakura, but yeah, otherwise, I guess I also should have focused on the fact that the final boss of the show ended up jumping out so early on, but really, when the show doesn't have that many stakes, it doesn't bother me that much. Well, they're already kind of appealing to the furry crowd, so may as well go all in, am I right? Though, I will say, Sadist Yuki is best Yuki, and I also give them credit for at least trying to be proactive by tracking down Gaon. Granted, Temple Wolfrun still doesn't feel like that much of a threat, especially after doing not much of anything a couple weeks ago, as well as over half the show. Meanwhile, the humans turned animal bits were cute enough, I guess, though wouldn't it have been something different and kind of interesting if they'd done at least part of the battle this week in their animal forms? Then again, with this many animators and outsourcing this week, I guess they couldn't coordinate anything that much out of the usual. That's probably also why they had to just end it suddenly with Mayu just using a net out of nowhere. That said, I do like that Torame is on the verge of pulling a face turn, as he's pretty much the only interesting antagonist at this point, so may as well get him away from the riffraff. But yeah, overall, just another meh episode, especially for not doing enough with the human-turned-animal concept. Okay, give me a Neanderthal Cure episode and I guess I'll be kind of happy. Heck, even the writers seem to agree with this, as this was actually one of the more plot-relevant episodes of the show, as they include a very obvious backstory for Gao that we probably could have used before we were well into the final core of the series, but oh well. Still, I guess it's kind of interesting to give him a human friend, especially knowing how their tale is going to end with an extinction. FYI, in real life it was mostly because the wolves caught rabies, which I doubt they'll point out. Still, yeah, the best parts of the episode were the Neanderthal cures, especially Mayu just going full Miyane. I do kind of wish Yuki had gotten a little more agency beyond just playing along with everyone, but it was fine. And the play happening over the fight this week was kind of clever in showing Gao's hypocrisy. So yeah, overall, fine enough episode for building up a plot that should have been built up much earlier, and the Neanderthals were good. Well, nice to see that Bumby scored a decent gig after Otana, but yeah, I guess it figures that this, and likely the next episode, are just gonna be more Neanderthal episodes. Not complaining, as I do keep saying, I do like these two, and Mr. Nekoyashiki and his unsolicited photography was kind of entertaining. I did really appreciate how passionate he was about his craft, though when he wasn't ultra instincting, there wasn't really much going on in this episode. I mean, yeah, at this point, we know this town is obsessed with animals. They kind of highlighted that over the past 42 episodes, which, by the way, how many do we have left? Like 7 or 8? Well, whatever. The chase this week was also pretty good, as at least they actually did chase something with a zebra this week, though at the same time, it did kind of make me want to go back and watch Centaur Academy. Like, does anyone remember that show? It was actually really good. Yeah, I think I'll go back and watch that instead. So wait, the show pretty much has Rena Ryugu in it, and she's not the best Yandere in this episode? What a strange world we live in. But yeah, it's clear this is going to be the last Mayu-centric episode of the series, and hey, at least they went out on a high note with some of that good old over-the-top Yuka Tsuchida direction. Yeah, stuff like the aforementioned Yandere crab and possessive Yuki can only come out of that director's head. More importantly though, this was a great conclusion to Mayu's arc of becoming a little more social by not only getting closer to her classmates, but even a mortal enemy in Zakuro. I would of course also hope for another Yuki-centric episode, as she was kind of overly antagonistic towards the wolf, but if this is the true final episode of Neanderthal Precure, I'm glad it was an episode like this at least. But yeah, with this, I guess both of Gao's servants are gonna pull face turns, with the big bad wolf himself likely to do the same by the end of the series. Anything to avoid those troublesome fights, am I right? Oh boy, I can't wait for that Singing Magical Girl series to start. Nope, not that one. There you go. Hi, future me. Just want to quickly say that that idiot is completely wrong, and you and Idol Precure has been pretty solid so far. Just wanted to say that before we get to the next episode. Okay, absolute credit where it is due. They actually brought up dog ears in a very tasteful way in the show. It does kind of make me wonder if they'll bring this up with Komugi, as this episode wasn't written by the head writer Yoshimi Narita, but rather Mio Inoue, who along with Junko Komura have low-key been the real MVPs of the show. But yeah, I also do wish that Komugi had a little bit more of a reaction to Fuku's passing, or at least a realization to the fact that Iroha will likely long outlast her, which they could do if they revisit this subject. Because if they don't, well then oof, that's some unfortunate waste of potential. Still, I really don't want to be too negative with this episode, as they really did do a lot right. Heck, we even got the closest thing to a proper Precure fight since Yami's debut, when they took on a T-Rex. And yeah, it ended a little anticlimactically, but it also furthered Torame's character development, so it gets a pass. And honestly, the fact that Iroha pet Barney kind of made up for it, and also distracted from the rather depressing, but really well told main story. Well, I guess that's somewhat of a follow-up. I mean, I still want to see a more proper reaction from Komugi, but I guess it's something, well, in this case, it was meant to give Iroha somewhat of a character arc in the last few episodes of the series, with her solidifying her whole gimmick about being friendly, friendly with everyone. Though, as a result, it does feel a little rushed to give her character development this late, especially when they are very clearly trying to hit the viewers with the feels this week. And look, I'm not saying it wasn't well done, it's just that I really have become apathetic to this season, as well as this franchise's habit of backloading these sorts of developments almost every season as of late. If you felt something with Iroha holding back her feelings or Torame passing on after playing tag with them, then the episode did stop. Oh yeah, and they didn't have a real chase this week. They just played tag with a villain to convince him to let go of his grudge and pass on. Yeah, I'm gonna go watch Gav now. Oh goody, Yuki officially became friends with Komugi.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
I mean, don't get me wrong, I actually do like that she has gotten some of the most character development alongside her owner, and her exchange with Sakura was nice, as it highlighted how both animal girls should just enjoy the here and now rather than remembering their painful past. And hey, at least Gao isn't going into the climactic final 4 episodes of the show alone. But yeah, other than that, a fairly typical Christmas episode where, no big surprise, the monster of the week was a reindeer, though it was also one of Santa's, who didn't even appear in this episode and just kind of left these girls and their pets in charge of his reindeer and slave for his once-a-year job. What a lazy jerk. Oh hey look, they're doing that one thing from Squid Game. Yeah, honestly that and the admittedly clever usage of 2025 being the year of the snake and Yuki's phobia were things that stuck out the most for me in this one. I mean, the conflict with the wolves has just been so poorly built up in my opinion that I really didn't feel anything when Gaon launched his final attack and Sakura showed signs of her very obvious face turn. Maybe next season, they should at least try to make the villains a thing rather than pretty much an afterthought like they were here.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Like, yeah, I get that this twist was foreshadowed and all that, so I won't criticize it for coming out of nowhere or anything like that, but come on, you have to admit, it is hilarious when you realize the final boss of this show is just some animal-loving hippie in a furry suit. Like, sure, I was wrong about the Komugi ship, but the fact that Sakura, the wolf girl, still wants to be with a human is still at least on brand for Narita. On that note, yeah, her face turn was pretty weak, but hey, at least the animation this week was nice thanks to Nishiki Inoka, even though I was kind of spoiled by Yoshiyama, who I think I'll go back to in just a bit. Still, overall, I guess this was a good build-up to a finale for this show, and hey, I can't say I wasn't entertained. You know, it really says something when the only thing anyone really talks about in regards to this penultimate episode is the appearance of Satoru and Daifuku's transformations from the movie. Because shouldn't the biggest takeaway from a magical girl show be the boys? Though, to be fair, they were also the only ones who got some Yu Yoshiyama animation for this whole season, and really, there was just nothing much else to talk about. I mean, as hilarious as the concept is that the final boss is a furry who even does his own howling and everything, Subaru is just a lame villain overall. Like, they really tried to turn him into a sympathetic villain, but for me, that just goes out the window when he committed countless examples of animal mistreatment just to revive the real Gaon. And yet, he was also kind of rewarded by being reunited with him in the afterlife, though really, that's just emblematic of a season like this where the idea of consequences and any kinds of stakes really don't exist, so I wasn't expecting much. Okay, credit where it's due, beautiful animation that did indeed get across the emotions of the characters for this grand finale, but if you're expecting me to feel something for them after they temporarily lost their ability to talk to each other, yeah, that ain't happening. But honestly, I'm not even upset that they didn't go with the far more obvious and meaningful ending of fully taking away their ability to talk, to really highlight how they did need to connect with each other as true friends and all that. Because frankly, from the beginning, I wasn't expecting anything from the season, and while there might be a few inspirational bursts here and there, I got pretty much exactly what I expected. Nothing. Thus, even compared to seasons like Delicious Party, I just didn't have really strong emotions for it, positive or negative. I'll certainly hope that the Owls give me something more to actually talk about, even though I've got some other shows that I'd rather review. But for this show, and the Precure franchise, except for Mirai Days, as that's still really good, all I can say is, farewell for now. So yeah, that Gaon twist. Honestly, I'm just glad I wasn't the only one who called out BS on that. Like, I have heard some people were able to predict this twist based on the fact that his face never seemed to move like one of those cheap Super Sentai monster face masks, but at the same time, yeah, I think a lot of people also didn't want this twist to happen because it would end up removing a lot of the interesting nuance of having a conflict between man and beast, which, considering the subject animal, yeah, they're missing out on a lot. The Japanese wolf, or Honshu wolf, as that's where they primarily resided, were a subspecies of gray wolf. They were unfortunately hunted to extinction, though not for the whole stereotypical we have the guns so we have jurisdiction to wipe these suckers out sort of reasoning. No, there was a little more nuance to that, in that, well, they had rabies. As a result, they ravenously attacked a lot of livestock and humans alike, resulting in policies being put in place during the Meiji Restoration to shoot them on sight. Now, of course, there's a lot of debate that could be had on whether or not these actions were justified, and really, who was even at fault here. Sure, the wolves are dangerous to everyone, including their own kind, but at the same time, they didn't just develop rabies on their own. It was likely brought into Japan when they started trading with China and Korea. There was a lot of gray areas and nuances that could have been explored here had the antagonist been actual wolf instead of just some jackass who spoke for the wolves. Like, for one thing, has Naruto just developed a thing for eco-terrorists as of late? Because these are the worst kinds of villains in my opinion, and not in the good way. They ultimately just become hypocrites with their absolutely self-righteous views that end up disregarding the cause they're supposedly fighting for. As a result, they just become eye-rolling, and I'm just left begging for them to shut up and get off my screen. Though to be fair, they're at least very true to life. That said, and even put aside some of my own personal issues, I do have to agree with a lot of people who say that this did end up kind of muddling a much stronger message when Gaon wasn't exactly as advertised. Were there more humane ways of dealing with threatening animals like the wolves? What might they have said in their defense if they could have? How much damage have humans done to their environments by introducing stuff like rabies? There's just a lot that could have been explored and addressed, but yet I don't think the show really wanted to do that for one main reason. They didn't want to portray humans as evil, which, not to be a total nihilist, but that's often not the case. And no, I'm not saying there weren't any antagonistic humans in this show at all. Obviously, there was the hunters from the past, Gaon or Subaru himself, and I guess those human Gargars from the stage show. Nah, those don't really count. Still, did you notice that little qualifier that Subaru also does fall under? People from the past. Yeah, the show doesn't want to just admit that some modern humans have ever been bad to animals, which, yeah, about that. In fact, and this might be another one of my old crackpot theories, but I do wonder if they were originally planning on having Komugi's backstory involve her coming from a family that, let's just say, didn't treat her well, which would explain why she looked so beat up in her first flashback, but then the creators got cold feet, and they decided to make her original owner the kind old man, which led to a pre-half-baked little backstory. Now, of course, I'm not expecting Precure of all things to just go full on JoJo and try to get over the idea that a villain is a villain by having them do some not very nice things to doggos, like seriously, Arky chill dude. But at the same time, trying to ignore such issues in a show all about animals and how to bear care for them, it just seems incredibly counterintuitive to not show or at least call out those who will harm animals even indirectly. It's likely why they shied away from bringing up the issues and even encouraged the idea that it's good to keep elephants in captivity when generally it's not. And that brings up another good point. It is inevitably going to hamper the writing of the show, which, as I've always said, I've been a huge advocate against. Like, just because it's a kid's show doesn't mean it can't tackle some more serious topics, which this franchise has done many times over. But no, they just want to make one of the safest seasons possible by avoiding any finger pointing towards the audience, and instead just laying all of the evilness onto Subaru, who, yeah, also didn't receive any karma in spite of doing some pretty awful things. Like, not only did he force his so-called liberation onto the animals of the human world, but he also forcefully drafted the humanless Nico-guarded animals into his little war, which also turned out to be a whole bunch of hooey as he actually was trying to resurrect the real Gaon, and you see the problem here? When you don't spread out the evil, or at least acknowledge the faults of man, it removes any interesting nuance that can be built from it. Would the Maze of Mobius have been as poignant if he wasn't the creation of Labyrinth's obsession with advanced technology that's becoming eerily closer to reality every day? Would villain factions like the Bad End or Selfish Kingdoms have been as effective if they didn't take advantage of people's insecurities? And again, I'm not saying everything has to be a downer or melodrama like, say, Hakuto, and I think they should also strive to be their own thing, which they kinda tried to do with their animal leads and chase action, but in the end, I really just think that they ended up making one of the most generic magical girl anime ever. Yeah, as much as they tried to do different with the series by removing actual combat, or apparently writing Komugi more like a dog, or at least their conception of how dogs think, they overlooked doing anything truly different with this particular series. Like, sure, some of their stuff was different for the Precure franchise, but let's be honest here, this franchise isn't the end-all be-all. Like I said back with Delicious Party, there are just a lot of options for these sorts of shows in and out of the magical girl genre that can either use animal motifs in more entertaining ways, or teach things about them without the extra baggage of being a magical girl show. For me, after the first 4 episodes, it really did feel like I wasn't gonna have much to talk about with this series, at least not enough for a full 8-minute review, so we switched to those shorts, and sure, while there were some episodes where I kind of wish we had talked a little bit more about, hence why I'm doing this kind of compilation right now, I also kind of predicted that it would be hampered down by all the gimmicks that they tried to advertise, which yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. The lack of combat removed a lot of the drama and catharsis that does inherently come from seeing superheroes overcome insurmountable odds. And Komugi, at least in my opinion, was just another long line of idiot pinks with, I guess, some dog traits? Again, they supposedly wrote her like how they think a dog thinks, and yet what does that say when they clearly portrayed Yuki as being objectively the smarter and more talented animal curer? Now, to this show's credit, those gimmicks certainly paid dividends. As we said at the top of this video, it did end up giving them much better revenue than previous years, but at the same time, I can't but help but wonder if Toei kind of got cold feet, especially considering what was on the horizon. Orchestra, I can't help but wonder if Toei felt pressured to counter-program them with You and Idol Precure, especially after it came out that Takara Tomy was going to make their toys, and Precure's toy manufacturer, Bandai, are their direct competitor. It would explain why certain aspects of this season do feel a little cobbled together, like the fact that this season about singing magical girls doesn't have transformation sequences where they sing. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still finding this current season really solid overall, in spite of ultimately just minor nitpicks, and also my initial trepidations, but yeah, at the same time, it does kind of say something when they just went back to some tried and true formulas after this series. I think Toei realized that while they can, and certainly did milk a lot of the younger child audience with Wonderful, it ultimately is a rapidly shrinking audience due to Japan's low birth rates. Thus, they kind of need to bring back their older, or at least more general audience. So realistically, what can they even do with this team going forward? I mean, give credit to the Kira team, while they didn't partake in a lot of fist throwing, they also didn't shy away from it, so what is this team supposed to do, especially when even in their own movie, they just let the veteran Kiras do all the fighting. FYI, I'm not sure if I'm gonna review this film or not. But yeah, I think that's the final thing I do have to admit about this series, at least for me personally. I just don't quite get it, like, especially considering with the franchise going forward. Not only are future series not going to take much influence, if any, considering how Idol is pretty much a complete reset for the franchise, I also don't think the series is going to be all that memorable without at least a compelling story. Like, if you enjoyed the show with its more slice-of-life stories and characters, then good for you, but I just think this franchise needs a little more than that after over 20 years worth of shows, with several shows pulling off just those aspects better, along with having overall more compelling story. But yeah, those are just my opinions. What are yours? Did you find something compelling about this Jujutsu Kaisen reject trying to represent a bunch of wolves? Did you actually enjoy the chase action? Honestly, do feel free to let me know in the comments below, because I think we should discuss this sort of stuff. Sorry for the very different format, as yeah, technically this is going to be our overview for the show, though don't worry, we will go back to the more traditional, less chaotic ones for You and Idol and Kira Precure a la mode very soon, as yeah, I think I might have some more positive things to say about that show at least. But still, until then though, farewell for now my friends, and is there a wolf on the beach? Oh, no, that's not a wolf. I really should stop recording on the beach.